I want to welcome you to this webinar, which I've decided to do in honor of World Hypnotism Day. And I'm both a clinical sexologist and a hypnotherapist, certified hypnotherapist through the National Guild of Hypnotists. And it's interesting being part of two kind of complementary, I would say complementary helping professions. Clinical sexologists are not licensed unless they are also licensed therapists, and, in an additional dual practice. And hypnotherapists and clinical or consulting hypnotists are also not licensed. So, we're kind of very valuable, but somewhat, I wouldn't say marginalized, but maybe underappreciated is a better word. And I think that there's an incredible marriage that can happen between hypnotism and all the skill set that professional hypnotists have. And also, of course, I'm not going to leave out the therapists who make skillful use of hypnotism too, and the licensed clinical social workers. But just for purposes of this presentation, I will be talking more specifically about sexologists and hypnotists and sex coaches as well, like the people who go through Patty Britton's Sex Coach U program, and get a sequential course that makes a lot of sense and helps train people to include that in the practices that they've already got. Anyway, that's my focus, the marriage of hypnotism with sexology to use it to help our clients, basically. So hypnotism has a long history. If you're not aware of it, I'm going to enjoy letting you know about this, a very, very long history of being used in sexual dysfunction and also promoting sexual pleasure and enjoyment. I just came out of a year's worth, pretty solid year's worth of investigation into the uses of hypnotism in sexual situations, for sexual problems and concerns. And it was the topic of my second doctorate. And boy, am I glad writing that thing is over with, but it left me with an amazing bunch of knowledge and trivia and insight. And of course, I've been using hypnosis in my own practice now since 2008. And not a terribly long time, but long enough to understand that there are some definite benefits to adding this to your clinical bag of tricks or toolbox, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what's the word. On the other hand, for hypnotists, I see that there is definitely a need for much more training in the realm of human sexuality, because many hypnotists who are addressing sexual concerns, and your clients may come to you for everything from erectile dysfunction to quitting smoking if you're a hypnotist, unless you've made it a point to specialize in something like medical hypnosis or weight loss or whatever, sports hypnosis. There's a lot of specialties there. But hypnotists are pretty much, all-purpose people who make nimble use of hypnosis to help their clients in numerous ways, and they become very, very skillful at picking up different ways of doing inductions and ways of writing scripts and ways to access, really what it all comes down to is accessing the subconscious, unconscious, intuitive part of their client, because actually the client really has a great deal of wisdom to bring to the hypnosis session, and a well-trained hypnotist will recognize that fact and make use of it. However, human sexuality is so diverse, so varied, so complicated, so interesting, and everybody's erotic nature is so different that if you rely only on your own personal experiences and insights, and maybe one or two classes that you took from somebody, you may be doing a little bit of a disservice to yourself and to your clients by not having that training. So part of the point I think I'm going to be making later, it gets more to these ideas of training and a wonderful dual training that's possible in addressing sexual problems with hypnosis. So getting back to what it can be used for, if a sexual dysfunction is not medically caused or the primary cause is not medical, it's a pretty good bet that you could probably use hypnosis to help your client manage this. Specifically, I'm thinking in terms of erectile dysfunction is a big one. This is such a clear case in so many cases of people becoming very anxious, and their anxiety makes the problem worse. And so a lot of times with erectile dysfunction, you're not going to talk first about the penis, you're going to talk first about the anxiety, because if you can get the blood flow back into the penis, if the circulation is going to be promoted by being able to relax. Lately I've been thinking of the old Mad Magazine icon, Alfred E. Newman, and his slogan, "What me worry." I mean, I'm old enough that I grew up with Mad Magazine, right? I think this guy is the poster child for overcoming erectile dysfunction, even though he does bear, sort of a resemblance to George Bush the second, but we won't go there. Anyway, what me worry? Yeah, relax, and you're going to have a better chance of having an erection that's going to stick around long enough for you to have fun with it. Hypnotism can definitely help with that relaxation, right? Low desire is another thing where, somebody may have just cut themselves off from their sexuality, for whatever reason. Boredom, trauma, shame, guilt, there may be physiological things like perimenopause. There could be hormonal fluctuations. There's all kinds of things. But in many cases, if there's not a clear medical indication, this is something that's emotional and maybe deeply seated. And hypnotism is great for accessing that. You can find out what is in the way of that person's connection to their erotic self and their desire and their ability to feel, lusty and happy about it. So this idea, too, of overcoming shame and negative self-talk, hypnotism is famous for delivering positive suggestions, and you always want to deliver a positive suggestion in hypnosis because your client's subconscious will take that language quite literally. Literally, yes, it's early in the morning for me. I think I better have another. So always positive language, such as "you're feeling great" under hypnosis, as opposed to "you no longer feel sick," because the subconscious is going to hear "feel sick." Just like a 3-year-old, when you tell that 3-year-old, "don't run across the street," the kid hears "run across the street." They don't hear the "don't." So always positive language, and that will help to counteract this phenomena of negative self-talk. A brilliant man, Dr. Daniel Eroas, who has written several books published in the 80s on hypnosis and sex therapy. Go find these books online if you are interested in this at all, and get the, I believe it's Hypnotism and Sex Therapy. You ought to be able to find it fairly inexpensively, say on Amazon. Do not get the one with a slightly different title that costs, over $100. No. It's essentially the same book, and it's just, I guess, rarer, and that's why it's so much money. So get the one with the green cover. And this man is brilliant, and he gives a wonderful introduction in very practical ways, as well as beautiful theoretical ways of using hypnotism in a practice. So I cannot recommend these books enough, and when I teach classes, and I'm hoping to do more, I definitely always recommend his book. So, find it. Dr. Daniel Eroas, A-R-O-A-Z, and you'll see a couple of his quotes later. Anyway, he talks a lot about the negative self-talk. Again, I talked a little bit about accessing the subconscious. We can get a lot of insights into the origins of people's sexual hang-ups or problems. If there's shame, and I'm not necessarily talking about recovered memories. That is very tricky and very controversial. What I prefer to do is to approach anything that comes up that looks like a narrative and potentially a memory as a narrative offered up by the subconscious to illustrate or explain something that happened or a feeling that exists as opposed to an actual literal memory. Because, you know, as I say, this is very controversial, and I have personally had the experience of, I guess I'll tell the story, it's quick. I personally had the experience under hypnosis of feeling that I was a 14-year-old boy in the cabin of a pirate ship with a shirt on and no pants, and there was something around my neck, and I was scared to death and wanted to get out of there. Now, some people might say, oh, you had a past life memory. Some other people may say, well, you had a memory of your early life that, you know, you've just managed to cover up with this pirate ship thing. I was big on pirates when I was a little kid. What I prefer to approach that as, and it made perfect sense, and I got great benefits by going through that session anyway, was that I felt constrained, and I needed to take action to free myself from those constraints. And so during the hypnosis session, even though I was scared and there was a very creepy kind of sexual abuse subtext to this session, you know, I asked the hypnotist. I wanted a knife to cut the rope around my neck. I wanted a key to get out the door. And I wanted a way to instantly jump ship and land on a beautiful beach far away. Under hypnosis, you can leap tall buildings at a single bound. Your client can do amazing things under hypnosis that they'd never be able to do in real life. And somehow these narratives, skillfully worked with and used, you know, with the hypnotist acting as sort of like the container of the session. In fact, you very much do contain and delicately guide. You don't mold it, but you delicately guide it. You can help your client do things. I'll give you an instance of a client I had who had been deeply shamed by somebody in her family, sexually shamed. And this had affected her ability to enjoy her relationships, even several years later as an adult. We ended up gluing a fake mustache onto an image of the person who shamed her. And it was wonderful because every time she thought of this shaming person who had yelled at her, she saw the mustache on the person's face, and it made that person look very, very silly. And so the client was able to gain some levity and some freedom and began to access her own erotic self because she had a way now to laugh and to fight this sort of fearsome thing that had been hanging over her and interrupting all her pleasure to great detriment of her relationship. So these things may seem silly or frivolous, but they actually can help work deep, transformative things for the clients. So these are just a couple of examples, right? But beware of taking scenarios that come up in hypnosis as the literal truth. You know, work with them as if they're an archetypal vehicle, and I think you'll be on surer ground. Unless you are so precisely trained in sexual abuse and memories that you're relying, you know, intensely on super good psychotherapeutic training. Otherwise, I wouldn't, you know, I would be very cautious. However, you can use hypnotism to assist people with getting relief. If somebody comes to you and says, you know, I've been abused, I've been raped, and they're experiencing the triggers that make them turn off and dissociate at any time, so particularly during sex with a partner, you can use the hypnosis to help them relax that, you know. So you give them images where they can, you know, breathe and can add to. It's not, in this case, it wouldn't be the be-all and end-all for that client, but it can add to the different things that you would bring to your client. Does that make sense so far? So I've just spent a lot of time talking about this one particular slide, and it's only 2, and I better get going, right? So I've concocted an idea of what I call sexological hypnotism, and you can read this slide, and this is where I'm talking about the wonderful liaison between clinical sexology or sex coaching with hypnosis. We have another clinical sexologist in the room, yay. We all here, you know, sexology is the study of what people do and how they feel about it. And I love that. It's multidisciplinary, and it gives us a wonderful, broad look at the way in which human beings have talked about, written about, created works of art, and agonized about and celebrated sexuality. And so we get a wonderful look at so many aspects of that in sexology. And hypnotism, of course, is just the skillful manipulation of natural states, changes in brainwaves to help affect positive change. Very simple. We all go into hypnosis naturally because we daydream, we drive on automatic. You know, we do that kind of thing. We imagine, we get fiercely concentrated on an interesting project. These are all changes in our brainwaves.